Donald Trump and Xi Jinping face off at the UN, while Chinese soldiers show their mettle. And Sweden stands up to China. Yes, I said Sweden. That and more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. President Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping just faced off at the United Nations. Well, I mean virtually. Everything is still pretty much on lockdown because of the coronavirus, which is one thing Xi Jinping told everyone not to worry about.
Facing the virus, we should enhance solidarity and get through this together. We should follow the guidance of science, give full play to the leading role of the World Health Organization, and launch a joint international response to beat this pandemic. Any attempt of politicizing the issue or stigmatization must be rejected.
Yeah, we shouldn't point out any country that may have been responsible for covering up the coronavirus and allowing it to spread around the world. How would that help anyone? Well, President Trump kind of had the opposite message.
We must hold accountable the nation which unleashed this plague onto the world, China. In the earliest days of the virus, China locked down travel domestically while allowing flights to leave China and infect the world. China condemned my travel ban on their country, even as they canceled domestic flights and locked citizens in their homes. The Chinese government and the World Health Organization, which is virtually controlled by China, falsely declared that there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission. Later, they falsely said people without symptoms would not spread the disease. The United Nations must hold China accountable for their actions.
That, of course, infuriated the Chinese Communist Party. So they accused the U.S. of spreading a political virus. I don't know what a political virus is, but it sounds bad. Definitely worse than an actual virus that has killed nearly 1 million people. I mean, by the Communist Party standards, politics are everything. Killing 1 million people? That's a solid day's work. In his UN speech, Xi Jinping downplayed any alleged conflict that may be brewing between China and any other country.
We have no intention of fighting either a Cold War or a hot one with any country.
Yep, they have no intention of fighting a war with any country. I mean, sure, China sent almost 40 warplanes to threaten Taiwan, but China doesn't consider Taiwan a country. Loophole! But there's also this, a more subtle threat to the United States.
With relations between China and the US continuing to deteriorate, a new video released by China's Air Force may be another source of concern. The highly produced piece released on a social media platform shows Chinese bomber aircraft capable of carrying nuclear weapons launching a simulated attack on what appears to be an American airbase in Guam.
I mean, how threatening can that be when some of the footage was lifted from Hollywood films? Speaking of, have you seen my new car? A video went viral this week showing Chinese soldiers crying as they're allegedly being shipped to the border with India. Are those soldiers actually being shipped to the border with India? Probably not. The video was originally posted on WeChat by a local newspaper in Anhui province called the Fuyang City Weekly, which said that the soldiers were new PLA recruits from Anhui that had just said goodbye to their parents and were crying on the way to the train station while singing a famous PLA song. The newspaper did say that 5 soldiers had volunteered to go to Tibet, which does border India. But also, Tibet is very big, so that doesn't mean they're going to the border. So, how did the video go viral? Apparently, it was posted online by a Pakistani comedian. Didn't see that one coming. He claimed that these soldiers were being sent from Beijing to the Indian border. And then the video started going viral. And that got picked up by Indian media and Taiwanese media. And now You have Chinese state-run media using this story to accuse Taiwanese media of making stuff up. And meanwhile, the original WeChat post seems to have been deleted. Trying to figure out what happened with this story is almost as bad as being stuck on a bus with a bunch of crying Chinese soldiers. And after the break, the US government is blaming China again. Welcome back. Republicans in the US House of Representatives have released a new report blaming China's cover-up for the coronavirus pandemic. Ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Michael McCall, said in a statement, "It is crystal clear that had the CCP been transparent, and had the head of the WHO cared more about global health than appeasing the CCP, lives could have been spared and widespread economic devastation could have been mitigated. Revealing the truth is just the first step. We must hold both the CCP and WHO Director General Tedros accountable for the suffering they have allowed the world to endure." Wait, didn't anybody listen to Xi Jinping's speech? We're not supposed to point fingers, people. Speaking of not pointing fingers, the Chinese Communist Party is expanding its mass labor program in Tibet. Tell me if this sounds familiar. China is pushing growing numbers of Tibetan rural laborers off the land and into recently built military-style training centers, where they are turned into factory workers. Remind you of what the Chinese Communist Party is doing in Xinjiang to the Uyghurs? You know, it's funny. Just this week, the House passed the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. That's to punish the Chinese regime for using forced ethnic slave labor in Xinjiang. But fortunately for the Chinese regime, they've been working on a backup plan. Forced ethnic slave labor in Tibet. That'll show the US government. This Tibet forced labor program has been gaining steam since 2016. Beijing has set quotas for the mass transfer of rural laborers within Tibet and to other parts of China. Which actually reminds me of another thing Trump said at the UN that may have been about China.
If the United Nations is to be an effective organization, it must focus on the real problems of the world. This includes terrorism, the oppression of women, forced labor, drug trafficking, human and sex trafficking, religious persecution, and the ethnic cleansing of religious minorities.
Wow, it's kind of hard to disagree with that. Hard, but not impossible. And after the break, guess who's standing up to China? Welcome back. Here's a wild one. Sweden's state-owned space company, which provides ground stations that help fly Chinese spacecraft and transmit data, said on Monday it would no longer renew contracts with China or accept new Chinese business. Wow, that's crazy. Sweden has a space program. It's affordable, and everything is made out of particle board and meatballs. Apparently, the Sweden Space Corporation has had contracts allowing Beijing access to its antennas in Sweden, Chile, and Australia since at least 2011. But now, Sweden is standing up and saying no more. Poor China. Where else can they go for low-cost space antenna? Oh, right, China. But don't worry too much about China, because according to this new report from Amnesty International, with a surprisingly artistic cover, EU firms have been selling surveillance tools to the Chinese police. Which, when you say it out loud, sounds like a great idea. According to Amnesty, our revelations of sales to Chinese security agencies and research institutions that support them are just the tip of the iceberg of a multi-billion euro industry that is flourishing by selling its wares to human rights abusers with few safeguards against end-use abuses. And this just proves how valuable human rights are, because they can be sold out for billions of euros. But while the Chinese regime can shell out billions to spy on its own citizens, feeding them might be a very different matter. China is potentially facing a major food shortage.
China, which embarked on the mission of becoming a superpower by showing its economic and military might to the world, now may be brought to its knees over a shortage of food, reduction in overall domestic food production, a recent deluge in the Yangtze River Basin, the Rice Bowl of China, and a slash in imports, mostly aggravated by deteriorating diplomatic relations, has caused Beijing to hit the panic button.
Some Chinese counties have said they can only meet half their grain reserve quota. So Chinese President Xi Jinping's big ambition to turn China into a moderately prosperous society might be a ways off. And now it's time for me to answer a question from a fan of China Uncensored who supports the show on the crowdfunding website Patreon. Jason asks, genocide fries are only a side dish. What do you think is Xi Jinping's favorite main course to go with said genocide fries? Genocide fries. That's from my episode that talked about the U.S.'s ban on tomato imports from Xinjiang. It's a dark time for ketchup lovers. So, what's Xi Jinping's favorite main dish? I'm gonna have to say dumplings. Dumplings handmade by his best friend, Vladimir Putin. He's got some work to do on his dumpling wrapping skills. Which reminds me of the idea Shelley had for a cooking show with all the world's top authoritarian dictators. Cooking with authority. Now I'm craving dumplings with a side of French fries. The show takes me to weird places sometimes. Anyways, thanks for your question, Jason. And if you want me to answer your question on the show, join what I call the China Uncensored 50-cent Army on Patreon. Help support the show and get some cool perks. Head over to patreon.com/China Uncensored to learn more. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.